Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Hello and welcome to this episode of Driven. This is episode 4, another informational episode. And today's show is about how does an autonomous vehicle work? On the last show, we talked about the components of an AV or an autonomous vehicle. And this show is going to be about really the behavior of what's taking place inside those components, from input to output, from sensors through the planning and decision-making to controlling the vehicle's steering, brake, throttle, and other controls on a vehicle. So again, this is an informational episode, and we're going to dive a little deeper here, and we'll dive even deeper in the future episodes with respect to how some of these behaviors work. Route and path planning. One of the first things any autonomous vehicle really needs, or typically needs, is a map of an environment in which it can legally and technically operate. Like, what is its invisible fence, if you will? You can think of an invisible fence for a dog in a yard. Well, robot cars or autonomous vehicles need fences too. But in this case, it's a map of the environment, the roads that it can travel down, with waypoints along the way that typically define in a higher definition format the lanes in which it can travel. Maybe zones, maybe the boundaries of a parking lot or an open area in which it can operate, and then of course you need to have some sort of mission against that map. In other words, you're going to have a map of roads and the areas in which it can operate, and you're going to have to tell the vehicle its end destination, where it needs to go, and maybe the checkpoints it needs to visit along the way. So, given this map and a mission, a route has to be planned, much like you or I would poke in a destination into Google Maps or Apple Maps and ask it to take us there from wherever we are, or from some initial location. It's going to plot a route and a path from point A to point B to get you to your destination. And similarly, that needs to happen with autonomous vehicles. Sometimes this route of roads and the directions for its navigation are preloaded into a vehicle. Sometimes they're externally communicated through a central dispatch system, or from a central dispatch system to the vehicle, or it's onboard generated. In other words, an operator onboard the vehicle may poke in the coordinates and a route will be dynamically generated on board. And then the vehicle at that point has to hit all the destination checkpoints along the way and the ultimate destination that it's going to accomplish its autonomous mission. It may also be programmed to pull over to the side of the road at certain what we call boarding and alighting points, places where people may get on and off of the vehicle. It may be programmed to park in a particular parking spot or in a parking lot, and it has to find a parking location for it to park itself. And then there's other things that need to be sort of given in the maps and the mission information in order to navigate this route, such as valid speed limits, perhaps, for the roads in which it's traveling, maybe projected maximum speeds around curves, and ultimately the vehicle is going to plan a path over this route to enable a smooth ride, if you will. So there's typically something called like a spline path, a smooth curve over the route such that it can take the turns at a comfortable turning radius and at comfortable speeds as well along the way. Object and feature detection. Well, it's really important to, as you're going from point A to point B, avoid colliding with things. So you're going to have sensors on the vehicle, like we talked about in the last episode, some components such as LiDAR, radar, and cameras that are capturing information from the outside world. And so you're going to be getting this data into the vehicle, filter it in some way. There might be environmental noise such as rain, fog. It might be dark at night. It might be super bright in daylight. And there's going to be different types of algorithms and methodologies by which this imagery and this information coming into the system needs to be filtered from these various sensors. And that's going to be somewhat sensor dependent. But ultimately, after you get as crisp of an image or a crisp sense of the information that's coming from these sensors, you're going to do what's called perception. You're going to perceive the information and translate these raw points of data that come from LiDAR or target information that comes from radar or the camera information that you get, and you're going to translate that into objects about the physical world. Again, these are going to be people, cars, dogs, deer, and features too, like buildings, fixed signs, what we call fiducials, things that are in a known fixed location on a map that you can resolve from your sensor data. And then you're going to fuse all of this data. The vehicle is going to fuse all of this information into pools of objects. So you may have multiple perceived objects from different sensors. So now you have to resolve, is this obstacle that I saw or object that I saw from sensor A the same as the object that I'm seeing from sensor B that may be mounted somewhere differently on the vehicle? And you have to fuse that information such that you know it's the same object, and maybe even merge information that from the different sensors that you might not get from just one sensor about that object. For example, LiDAR can give you the width of something, whereas radar might not, but radar might give you the speed of something. So you can fuse the information and know that this object that I've detected from LiDAR and radar is of this width and of this speed based on the fusion of that information. And you're going to have information about the location and the orientation of these objects outside of the vehicle relative to the vehicle based on where the sensors are mounted on the vehicle, right? So there's going to be some translation from the location and the orientation of the sensors to typically some reference position on the vehicle. It might be reference to the center front bumper on the vehicle or the center of the vehicle. However, the autonomous vehicle algorithms that are operating inside the vehicle assess what's necessary. Pose detection. As we mentioned in the last episode, pose refers to the position and orientation and information about the vehicle that's critical for knowing where the vehicle is and how it's rotated, what its roll, pitch, and yaw might be, its heading, which is particularly important, the speed of the vehicle, the acceleration, the yaw rate, and you're going to get this from GPS sensors, inertial measurement units, and some speed sensors that may be mounted on the vehicle. And of course, the fusion of this information as well. You may be fusing data from multiple GPS antenna positions. Typically, you might have 2 antenna locations on the vehicle, and the GPS system may fuse that for you, or you may fuse it if you have 2 redundant GPS systems mounted inside the vehicle. But you can also may be fusing data from other inertial measurement units, fiber optic gyros, and all kinds of systems that may be in the vehicle to give you position, orientation, the heading, of course, speed, acceleration, the yaw rate, and other key aspects about the vehicle's position and orientation. You may also possibly incorporate detected features from LiDAR or cameras from the environment that you resolve against what you think those features are on a map. And if you can identify, sort of say, the edges of a building or some other fixed, generally known non-moving objects or fiducials in the environment, you can reference those against a map. And if you have enough of them, you can do what's called triangulate and know, based on the distances to each of those objects in the world, where you may be on the map. And that's called SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future as well. Navigation planning. Now, given your position on the map and a heading, you know where your next desired pathway point is on the route. You know where you are on the map, and now you're looking at the map and knowing, okay, here's the next waypoint ahead of me, and my path along the route to that waypoint. So I can get my current heading from the POSE system and get my desired heading based on the map information and calculate a difference for how much to steer. If my heading of the vehicle is pointed in one direction and my desired heading or course, I should say, is in another, there's a difference between those two angles, and I can calculate therefore how much I have to steer to the left and the right to kind of get me into the direction of the desired heading for the vehicle, and to ultimately the desired target waypoint that may be moving out ahead of me as I travel along the map. So given also your position on the map, the vehicle is going to be able to reference maybe a speed limit that it should be traveling, and it knows therefore its maximum allowed speed that it can travel during this particular segment of the road and the segment of the map that the vehicle is operating on. Maneuver and movement planning. So given pose, where you are on the map, this can trigger certain maneuvers based on where you are. Like, for example, stopping at a stop sign. If the map has a stop sign marked inside of the map somewhere, and you're approaching that location, based on your approach to that stop sign, that may trigger a maneuver and some movement activity to slow the vehicle down, right? So you're going to have an algorithm that tells you, okay, I'm approaching this stop sign, so I better slow down, get to this stop sign, and then engage in a sequence of steps, such as now have the sensors look to the left, to the right, maybe ahead, down lanes that other vehicles may be traveling and crossing your vehicle's path. And then the vehicle will respond and act appropriately. If it sees a vehicle traveling down a lane at the stop sign, where that vehicle doesn't have a stop sign for it, it should wait for that vehicle, right? If you're coming to an intersection with 4 stop signs at each intersection location, based on who gets to the intersection first and the rules of precedence for the particular geographical location that you're operating in, the vehicle may decide, well, I got to the stop sign first, so I'm going to go, or I'm going to yield to the vehicle to my left, so forth and so on. So based on where you are on the map, different maneuvers can be triggered. You also may be navigating into a parking zone where you're going to be parking in a parking spot. So the vehicle may start to engage in a maneuver to begin to park the vehicle and go through some sequence of steps where it's pulling forward, backing into the spot. Whatever the situation is may be driven by the map location, and that will trigger which maneuver or sequence of steps and movements the vehicle should take. Also, given the dynamic information that's coming in through the sensors, of course, that may trigger certain actions and maneuvers, such as collision avoidance. If the sensors are saying, hey, there's a car in front of me traveling at 20 miles an hour, the vehicle may slow down and pace itself behind that vehicle. Or if there's a stopped something in the middle of the road, that may trigger a collision avoidance maneuver to slow down and stop completely. Or if it's a situation where the vehicle in front is traveling particularly slowly, and you want to engage in a passing maneuver, that type of maneuver and movement may be triggered by the information that you're getting from the sensors dynamically. And then there's the arbitration of all these maneuvers and movements that the vehicles can engage in. Certainly, the vehicle is going to want to engage in those maneuvers that are most critical, safety critical first, such as collision avoidance. That's going to take precedence over, hey, I'm in the middle of a parking maneuver, so I'm just going to continue to park the car. Well, no, you're not going to continue to park the car if there's something in the parking spot. So a collision avoidance maneuver may be triggered to say, hey, stop the vehicle. And your parking maneuver may disengage or be temporarily paused until that object is removed from the parking spot. It also may govern the maximum speed. All of these maneuvers may compete with one another, and in a sense, in terms of which one's going to get priority. But regardless, if any one maneuver says, hey, my maximum speed right now should be 5 miles an hour and you're traveling 20 miles per hour, that may, and that should in most circumstances, take precedence over your current travel speed, and certainly the current maximum speed for the road in which you're traveling. So ultimately, you're going to be operating at the most restrictive speed as dictated by the various maneuvers that may be potentially active at any point in time. And then that will keep your vehicle from exceeding some maximum safe speed limit for the environment in which it's operating. Closed loop controls. Now, you may, after all of this movement planning, you may end up with a refined path. For example, if you're going to be passing a vehicle, your original path for traveling straight through the lane that you're on is going to be replaced with a new path that may be generated that plots a path around maybe the vehicle that's in front of you if you're engaging in a passing maneuver. But ultimately, you're going to end up with a target steering angle at which to turn the vehicle, and a target speed at which you should be operating, and maybe even a target deceleration rate for the maneuver that you're currently engaged in. For example, if you're pacing behind another vehicle, you may have a smooth deceleration rate such that it's not a herky-jerky ride along the way. But if something is leaping out in front of your vehicle like a deer, or a sudden obstacle appears in front of the vehicle, you might have a more aggressive deceleration rate. So you're going to have target steering angle, you're going to have a target speed, you're going to have a target deceleration rate, and then you have control cycles, which are going to issue commands appropriately enough to steering, brake, throttle on some periodic basis, typically some multiple of milliseconds. It may be every 10 milliseconds, every 100 milliseconds. It depends on the application. But ultimately, there's going to be some fixed loop that's looping through and saying, okay, what should I be issuing to the current steering actuators and the current brake actuators and current throttle mechanisms that are in the vehicle at this point in time, right? So based on your target steering angle and your target speed and target decel rate. So there's going to be closed loop controls, which take these, for example, the current steering angle that's desired and run through what's called a PID loop typically. Stands for proportional integral derivative control loop. We'll dive into that in a little bit more detail in maybe a future episode. But suffice it to say for now that that's what enables you to have a smooth control of the steering. You're not going to just jump right to a current steering angle and jerk the wheel to the left or jerk it to the right, you're going to have a more smooth transition of the steering wheel to the left or the right, just as you or I would steer a vehicle. And these PID control loops are going to determine for that control cycle what the current steering angle should be, and should be delivered to the steering controls mechanisms. There's going to be closed loop controls for target speed based on a target decel rate. And this may result in brake level and throttle level controls. And for each, you may have closed loop PID loops for each of those. Given my target speed and my current speed and my decel rate, here's what I want my my commanded speed to be during this control cycle. And then that will be dispatched or broken out into maybe a brake level and a throttle level, because that's what controls the speed of your vehicle. If you're slowing down, you're going to be releasing the throttle and applying more brake. And if you're accelerating, you're going to be releasing the brake and applying more throttle. And so you're going to ultimately end up with a brake level and a throttle level that's issued to a secondary brake controller or throttle control mechanism to control the brake and the throttle of the vehicle. And again, all this done in a way such that your ride is smooth, your speed control is as smooth as can be. You may have more aggressive braking if there's an obstacle in front and your target deceleration rate is higher, or you may have a smoother deceleration rate if you're making a chauffeur stop at the end of a mission, or as you come to a boarding or a lighting point along the way. There's also other controls, such as the control of the shifter, the shift state. If the maneuver is dictating that you should go into park, reverse, or drive based on the particular maneuver or movement plan that's currently engaged. Tying it all together. So when we look at the flow of autonomous control from input to output based on all of this, we can start to see how an autonomous mission is actually accomplished. So again, one of the first things you do is you get map data, mission information. That information is parsed, and a route and a path is ultimately generated from such processes. Then you have LiDAR, radar, camera information coming in from your sensors that you're also parsing, translating into object information through perception modules, fusing all of that object information, and maybe even detecting certain features as well, such as buildings and fiducials in the environment along the way. Then you're going to have information from GPS, inertial measurement units, speed sensors that you're parsing and also fusing to determine the position, orientation, speed, acceleration of the vehicle. And you also may use some of that information from your other sensors, such as LiDAR and camera, maybe even radar, to tell you, hey, here's a feature in the environment, and resolve that against some mapped feature. And based on that, based on where you think your current position is, what the current orientation of the vehicle is, and your desired route and path to travel on, you're going to then have the processes that navigate the vehicle to get to the next point along the way and make the vehicle autonomously navigate along the prescribed route and path that has been planned. Then, and this is typically a big part of any autonomous system, and really the heart of it, is the movement planning. So there are going to be a number of maneuvers in which the vehicle can engage, like collision avoidance, parking the vehicle, pacing or following behind another vehicle, passing a vehicle, navigating an intersection with stop signs or yields, handling traffic lights along the way. And you're going to have a number of maneuvers that are possible, but at any point in time, the vehicle is going to be typically engaged in an arbitrated maneuver that's taking the vehicle through a sequence of actions, such as pacing behind another vehicle, or if there's a sudden object, collision avoidance may become the priority maneuver, and the vehicle may start to engage in a maneuver to slow the vehicle down more aggressively. And all of this results in the dispatch of commands to the different key control points of the vehicle. You're going to control the steering to a desired steering angle, of course the brake level, the throttle level to control the speed of the vehicle, and the shift state of the vehicle, depending on the maneuver in which you're engaged. If you're going to be in drive most often, of course, but then you might engage in a reverse maneuver, or you may be parking the vehicle. So that is how an autonomous vehicle works in a nutshell. And that's a high-level view. Future episodes are going to dive deeper. We're going to peel away the layers of the onion, as we like to say, and dive deeper into each of these areas and in the methods even ultimately in which some of these underlying algorithms implement these behaviors and these capabilities for driving an autonomous vehicle. So that's this episode of Driven. Thanks for joining. Have a good one. I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.